It's time for some straight talk. Some people are big-time data users, some not so much.
Well, Straight Talk Wireless has unlimited plans of all sizes, like the newest, with the first 2 gigs of data at high speed, then 2G for just $35 a month. That's unlimited talk, text, and data, all on America's largest and most dependable networks. Big or small, everyone saves with Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts, only at Walmart.
A month equals 30 days. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
Here we are. We are back in better than ever. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And so, at this incredibly busy time in the American sports cycle, an enormous story falls unexpectedly from the sky, and I can't decide how much we care. Last night, an improbable series of events took place that resulted in the American soccer team failing to qualify for the World Cup for the first time since 1986. And smack dab in the middle of the baseball playoffs and the football season and the hoops and the hockey, I'm honestly curious just how much the average American sports fan cares. And the good news is I happen to have the average American sports fan sitting right next to me. The one, the only Booger McFarland is here this morning. Good morning, big fella. And let me start by asking you the question I will ask everyone. With everything else that's happening right now, we all understand that a lot of things are going on both on and off the fields of play in American sports and within the conversation that we have here daily. Just how much is this on your radar? The U.S. will not be in the World Cup next year.
Good morning, first of all, Greeny. It was on my radar last night, and I think anytime the World Cup comes around, anytime we're playing country versus team, country versus individual sports, I think the United States galvanizes. And I think for me, the U.S. men's national team is something that I always look forward to, especially in the World Cup. The last time they were there with the vuvuzelas and all that good stuff going on, like it was a spectacle that around the country we all galvanized around. And I think this time we were looking forward to it. And the fact that the U.S. men's national team won't be there, I think really we will care about it today. Twitter was a buzz last night. Taylor Twelman was really just off the chain last night with his comments. And I think everybody was going to care last night. But I think once today comes, it'll be an afterthought. I think with everything going on today, once 24 hours go by and 48 hours, I think the soccer team not making the World Cup will be an afterthought.
Yeah, I think what will happen then is when the World Cup starts, people will look around and say, oh, wait a minute, we're not in this.
Right.
And then it'll become sort of a big deal then, and then the World Cup will become much less of a big deal in this country than it otherwise would have been. I'm thinking back to 4 years ago and all that, and Mike and I pounding on the table and say, I believe that we can win, and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, so this is what it is indisputably is a devastating blow to soccer in this country. I mean, a gut punch to the growth of the sport in this country, because the growth has been astronomical. And there are a lot of people who feel that soccer is a sport in a big way on the come in this country. And I am one of those who believes that, even though I don't personally follow it closely or barely at all. But because I have kids who are teenagers, and I don't know, your kids are a little younger than mine, but I see that the teenagers, a lot of teenagers are into it. Now, they're not into American soccer particularly. They're not following MLS, but they are following Premier League stuff. They know all these plays, much, much, much more about it than I know. And so maybe they'll still watch the World Cup because they'll still get to see Messi and Ronaldo and all of the guys who are playing over there. But by and large, to your point, there are so many people that tune in just because it's a major international spectacle, and you put your patriotism cap on and you root for Team USA. Team USA not being there, this is a devastating blow to the growth of soccer.
You know, Greeny, and we could use this right now. I mean, 2018, the World Cup, I don't see times changing very much in our country by then. I think the World Cup, the U.S. team being there, was something that the United States could have used. And you're right. From a casual sports fan, I think the casual guy is going to tune in and like, hey, where's the U.S.? We're not there, because they will have forgotten what happened this year, and they'll realize that we're not there, and they'll turn off and they'll move on. So I think it's a huge deal. I think everybody realizes that this team probably should have been there. They had every opportunity to make the World Cup. And yes, I know there were some circumstances that maybe were out of their control last night with the water on the field. But understand this. When you're the better team, the other team is playing on the same field that you are. And regardless of how much moisture is on the field, regardless of the water content, regardless of the crowd, if you're the better team, you're supposed to win. And I think if you're a soccer purist, if there is such a thing out there, you're saying this morning that the United States has invested so much money in the U.S. soccer, because we realize that football around the world is the number one sport around the world. But here in the United States, it's our version of football. And if we want to ever catch up to what's going on worldwide, we have to invest so much money. And we have. And the fact that we failed to qualify for the biggest world event, I'm sure is going to be very disappointing to a lot of people in U.S. soccer.
Listen, the population of Trinidad and Tobago was 1.4 million people. I think there were that many people in the apartment complex I grew up in, and that's who we lost to last night. Again, a bunch of things had to happen last night, but the part of it that we controlled, the American team controlled easily, was just don't lose to Trinidad and Tobago, and they did. And then they needed help in other places that didn't come, and all that is what it is. One way or another, the bottom line of it is I'm just curious to know how much people will care about this. So I put a poll question up this morning because I really am interested to hear what people's reaction to it will be. And it's a pretty simple one. And the question is as follows. What is your reaction to USA Soccer failing to qualify for the World Cup? And I gave you three choices. Highly upset, mildly upset, don't care that much. So you can go, if you're on Twitter, on ESPN Greeny, and let me know what you think. I'm curious to see what people say.
Did you do the poll correctly? Because I know you have trouble with poll questions.
I struggle with that, but
exactly.
I'm getting better. No, it will expire 20 minutes before the show ends. I timed it out.
Okay.
So we'll have like the last segment of our show today. We will have final results, and we can discuss those.
So you've gotten better.
Listen, I am
not. Pretty easy to do. I'm
a quick study, Booger.
It's only taken a couple years, but okay.
I mean, it only took me 6 years to figure out how to do a Twitter poll. If I could get 280 characters, my poll would be spectacular. All right, we're Mike and Mike. Let's go off the top here. Here's where it starts. For the first time since 1986, the U.S. men's soccer team has failed to qualify for the World Cup. Going into yesterday, here's basically what had to happen, Booger. The U.S. had to lose to Trinidad and Tobago. Panama had to win. Honduras had to win. The ESPN Soccer Power Index projected a 3% chance that all that would happen. And guess what? The other 97% went down the drain. And again, Team USA not going to the World Cup this year.
No doubt. And the U.S., not only do they have to blame themselves, they actually scored a goal for the other team. Omar Gonzalez, an own goal. And it was a 43-yard shot by Alvin Jones also. Green, this is the first time the U.S. missed the World Cup since 1986. I was 9 years old then.
But I was in college. I mean, what, are you trying to rub that in now that you're so much younger than me? I don't understand the reason.
That had less to do about you. That was more about me and my youth.
I'm going to put a poll question up. The last, does America, how significant is it to you, how old Booger was the last time that U.S. soccer didn't make the World Cup? Very significant, slightly significant, don't care that much.
But you're saying they're concerned about you and
Hember wasn't born the last time we didn't make it into the World Cup. All right? You want to feel young now? Here we go. All right, what else? What have I got here?
Off the top.
The postponement of Game 4 of the Nationals and Cubs because of rain in Chicago yesterday means they will play it today at Wrigley Field. And in what can only be described as a stunning decision for stunning reasoning, Steven Strasburg will not pitch in this Game 4 today, despite the fact that he would be doing so on his regular rotational rest. And you're going to hear Dusty Baker's explanation in just a minute. But, Booger, I mean, you're a football player. Yeah. You guys, this is the equivalent of the Super Bowl. I mean, it is an elimination game for them. It's at least a postseason NFL game. Can you imagine being a little under the weather and missing this game?
First of all, I can't. My defensive line coach told me, Rob Marinelli, I had a poor hamstring. He said hamstring on a nose guard, unacceptable. You don't run far anyway. So here's a guy who has the sniffles. He's going to stand on the mound 60 foot 6 inches away and throw a baseball. You have the sniffles? The sniffles! You have a cold. Get a Kleenex. Go pitch. Are you serious, Steven Strasburg? And then you put your manager, Dusty Baker, in a very peculiar situation because Dusty's always going to protect his guys. And now he has to go out here and start lying about mold. And so now you got all the mold companies in the area concerned about the hotel. Like, this is a huge mess. And all Steven Strasburg had to do was man up. Man up. Okay, step up and show some grit for your teammate. And if all else fails, take some Dayquil. Like, let's take the Dayquil and let's go pitch, man. Come on.
You're going to hear everybody on this. It's just impossible to believe. All right, Game 5, Yankees-Indians tonight of the ALDS, and Corey Kluber and CC Sabathia will be the pitching matchup. Those two pitched in Game 2, which wound up being one of the most dramatic baseball games you'll ever see. But Corey Kluber had almost nothing to do with it. He got shelled. So he's the best pitcher in the sport, at least in the American League this past year. He's going to win the Cy Young. He got taken apart in Game 2. What is your expectation for him tonight in Game 5?
I think we'll see the norm. I think Game 2 was an anomaly, and we all made a great big deal about Tito and everything that he did. I think Corey Kluber comes out tonight. He plays well. I'm more concerned about CC Sabathia because I know he's a horse. I know Cleveland struggles against left-handed pitching. But, man, CC in this situation, can he conjure up the magic one more time? I'm more concerned about him. I think Corey Kluber will be fine, and I expect the Indians and him. More than likely, I think if you were leaning one way, I'd lean toward Corey Kluber pitching a gem of a game and the Indians winning.
Off the top.
Special night in Las Vegas last night as the new NHL team in town, the Golden Knights, played their first home game. It isn't the first game in the history of their franchise. They've actually won all of their games. But last night was their first home game, and Steve Levy was there. They did a terrific job, I thought, with the coverage last night on ESPN. Some of the little features of it that you may have seen. There were no advertisements on the boards anywhere. It just said Vegas strong everywhere you looked, and they brought first responders and others out onto the ice as part of a ceremony. It was a really special night. And to the point you were making a little bit earlier, a good illustration of the ability of sports under the right circumstances to galvanize people and bring people together.
You know, Greeny, you see something like this, and it just breaks your heart what happens. But then you see the people come together. And then for me, my thoughts and prayers go out to all the families that were affected. But then I get a little pissed off, Greeny, and here's why. Because at a time like this, we all come together. Like, we don't see color, we don't see anything. We just come together for each other. But it always happens at times where there's tragic situations. How come we can't do it when things are normal? How come we can't do it just like, okay, things are great, let's come together and make our country a better place? That's what bothers me about a situation like this.
Yes, I think many people share your feelings, and the answer to your question is I have no idea. Why does this happen this way? Obviously, if I had the answer to that question, I'd be doing something much more important for a living than this. But I share your feeling that it is disheartening.
Off the top.
Anyway, the final off the top note this morning, Adrian Peterson has been traded. He never really felt like a fit in New Orleans anyway. Now he goes to Arizona, where at least until David Johnson comes back, he has a chance, we would think, maybe to get some touches and see what he can do. What do you expect from Adrian Peterson in Arizona?
Nothing, because I think when you look at Adrian Peterson so far, he's a shell of himself. And I think even if he was closer to the Adrian Peterson that we know, when he gets to Arizona, he's going to realize that the 5 guys blocking for him up front, those ain't Hall of Fame guys. And I think the struggles of the Arizona Cardinal offensive line are really going to be the issue there. And so they're going to bring in a new back. He's going to take the place of Chris Johnson. But in the end, I don't think it'll matter.
All right, and that's Off the Top with Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. You could save hundreds on your car, business, or recreational vehicle insurance from a local independent agent. Go to Progressive.com today. Now, that's Progressive. Tons of guests all over the spectrum today, including Gruden and Herbie back-to-back in the second hour today, as we have every Wednesday. And we got Brad Stevens, the coach of the Celtics, will join us today, and Will Cain today, Field Yates, a whole lot more. Booger is here for Golick. Jam-packed sports day, of course, and we'll get some baseball in along the way as well, of course. Taylor Twellman went nuts last night, and you understand just how personal and significant this is to the people who have been building soccer in this country. You know, I mean, right now, football and basketball and baseball are so ingrained. They're so much a part of the fabric of our country that when things happen that are bad for the sport, I know, like the National Football League is in a tough place right now for a variety of reasons. And I know that a lot of former players like yourself, you take that to some degree personally. Yes. But you didn't build that league. That league was there before you. And it is there, you know, it will be there long after you. A lot of the guys like Taylor and some of the others that we know, like they were a part of the building of American soccer. Like the last 20 years or so have been have been what American soccer has been. So I understand how personally they take it when something like this happens. So it was a very, very, very bad night, and Taylor Twellman had this reaction.
It's not just about tonight. And anyone at home, sitting at home, saying it's about the game against Trinidad and Tobago, 100% unequivocally, it is not about tonight. It is a complete embarrassment when you look at CONCACAF for the amount of resources and the amount of money that is put into our sport. Here's what I said. If you can't beat Panama at home and you can't beat Trinidad on the road, you don't deserve to go to the World Cup. It's not about tonight. It's not about Jurgen Klinsmann. It's not just about Bruce Arena. As a whole, U.S. soccer is not prepared. Every single one of those players,
they can take some
nightmares
of that.
for the rest of their lives, because this is an utter embarrassment with the amount of money that is in Major League Soccer and in this sport. You can't get a draw, a tie against Trinidad? Max, you don't deserve to go to the World Cup.
And thus they don't. That was a very emotional Taylor Twellman. And again, I know Taylor and I respect him a lot, and I understand and appreciate his passion because, again, this is, you know, if we have a bad year in the NFL, or even when we didn't win the gold medal in basketball at the Olympics, when everyone was extremely upset. I mean, in 1988, we didn't win the gold medal.
Right.
And the next thing you know, we've got the dream team. We're sending the NBA players because we decided it was not okay for us to lose. But it wasn't the death blow of basketball in this country. And I'm not suggesting this is the death blow of soccer. But, boy, this is a devastating blow to a sport that is trying desperately to grow.
It stops the momentum, Greeny, and here's what I mean. You know, when I was doing local radio in Tampa, my partner then was telling me that there was a movement, a ground movement, to try to make soccer not the top sport, maybe not the second sport, but maybe the fourth sport in this country, behind football, baseball, basketball. Maybe it could take the place of hockey at being the fourth sport in the United States of America. There was a ground movement starting down low with small kids. Get the small kids involved with everything that's going on with football, with concussions. You start the movement early, and now by the time our generation gets older, then soccer has an opportunity to overtake hockey to become that fourth sport. So I think this is a blow to that movement, to all the momentum that was gained over the last few years since the World Cup to now, that the fact that they aren't going to be on the biggest national stage, I think slows that momentum down.
Yeah, listen, I mean, there are more kids in this country playing soccer maybe than anything. I don't know how they – is it the number one youth sport? It is. Hembo is nodding back at me. I'm assuming he has some numbers to back that up. or we're just getting Hembo's opinion, one way or the other. But I do believe it is the number one youth participation sport. Now, kids in this country have played soccer forever, and it is usually not translated into popularity with the sport on television. Look, it is what it is. There's no point in trying today to determine what this will mean to the sport 5 years down the road. There's no question. It is just indisputable. This is a terrible thing for the sport and for those who have an interest in seeing it grow. We are Mike and Mike, and right now at Lowe's, Pro customers can save on the supplies you need most from the brands you trust. To help get the job done on time and on budget, visit Lowe'sForPros.com for details. Okay, back to the sports that we talk about more frequently here. Game 4 in Chicago rained out yesterday, so they will play it this afternoon at Wrigley Field. So we got both games for you today on ESPN Radio. Nats, Cubs, Game 4, Wrigley Field in the afternoon. Yankees, Indians, winner-take-all, Game 5 tonight in Cleveland. Can I get a weather report for both those cities, please, Hembo? In the meantime, Steven Strasburg, I think we all assumed, would get the ball instead of Tanner Roark in this Game 4 now because he would be on his regular rest. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Dusty Baker gets up there yesterday and says, actually, that's not what's going to happen.
He was slated. Didn't work out for Strauss with his bullpen day. And, you know, we're all creatures of habit. And plus, we got full confidence in Tanner and Strauss. It'd have been better because he's feeling under the weather like a lot of my team is.
He's feeling a little under the weather like a lot of his team is. It gets worse. It gets worse because obviously you have to follow up on that. Well, what do you mean a lot of your team is feeling under the weather? And here's the explanation of that.
You know, a lot of my team is kind of under the weather with the change of weather and the air conditioning in the hotel and the air conditioning here. And this is the time of the year, you know, for mold around Chicago. I think it's mold because I have it too.
So we've got a $175 million pitcher who, if we are to take his manager at his word, and again, I like Dusty.
I love Dusty.
And I get you. He's just...
Dusty and I are frat brothers, by the way.
Are you?
Yes. But that still has nothing to do with the mold around Chicago. Is Chicago a city that has just mold floating around?
I mean, listen, I lived in Chicago for 11 years. I met and married my wife there. I spend as much time there as I do almost anywhere. I've never been affected by mold. I don't find the air conditioning there to be any more or less destructive to my overall health than anywhere else.
Wow.
I'm taken aback. I don't know what to say. And I guess if there is some criticism of Dusty to be found, it is if you're going to get up there and say something, could you have come up with something better than that? You know, listen, it's that time of year. We got air conditioning. We got air conditioning. Booger, we've got an issue with the air conditioning, and that's the reason that my pitcher is not pitching today.
And the mold around you.
And the mold. Now, we go through funny baseball injuries all the time, right? Like the time that Ricky Henderson fell asleep on an ice pack and missed a game with frostbite in August, which remains my favorite injury in the history of any sport. But this is something new. We're about to have one of the most decorated, highest, most talked about, first pick in the draft, $175 million contract pitcher miss an elimination game because of the air conditioning. Now, that is something I've never heard of before.
This is a bad look for Dusty, going back to when he took Scherzer out of the game, who had pitched 6 1/3, gives up 1 hit. Now you take him out, and that's a disaster. And so now you couple that with him getting to the podium and basically giving an excuse that, quite frankly, nobody across America believes. It's a bad couple of days for Dusty, and I think the only thing that's going to really salvage this for him is if they can go out and Tanner Roark can go out and get a win. But more importantly, think about this. Let's say Roark struggles.
Yeah.
You got any idea who's coming out of the pen first, probably?
Is it Strasburg?
Probably Strasburg. Are you kidding me?
Well, it may depend on the air conditioning. I mean, I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I covered a lot of games at Wrigley Field. I don't think they have air conditioning. That building was built like in 1912. Right. I don't think there's air conditioning in that building. I know that they redid the locker rooms and all that kind of stuff since last I was in one. I haven't covered a game there since the 90s. But I don't believe if there's air conditioning, it's relatively new and it's not that powerful.
No.
I've never heard of this before. Listen, this sounds, and this may be the most damning thing I can think of. Yeah. This sounds like something I would complain about, right? If you're going to miss a game because of something that would impact Greeny and no one else, like I could see myself coming in and saying, the air conditioning kind of got to me yesterday in the hotel. I don't feel so well. I have the sniffles. That's the kind of thing I would say.
All seriousness, though, Greeny, this is a bad look for Strasburg with his teammates because regardless of what happens this postseason, if you're a teammate of Steven Strasburg, you're going to look at him differently because as an athlete, I don't care what kind of sport it is. If we're a team and we're galvanized and we're bonded together and you leave me hanging at the most important time of the year because you don't feel well, because on your run, the sniffles were bothering you, understand this. Guys have Kirk Schilling played with blood coming out of his body.
Yeah.
He's out there pitching, and Strasburg has the sniffles. Think about how he's being mocked, not only in his own clubhouse, but around the sport of baseball. A $175 million man can't pitch because his temperature is 98.7.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Booger McFarland here for the big fella. One big fella in for another. We're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Bunch of things to get to here and a great hour in front of us with John Gruden and Kirk Herbstreit back-to-back as we have every Wednesday. I want to mention quickly the bobbleheads continue. You know that Mike and I have taken ourselves out of the bobblehead business, so our wives are giving them away. Stacey's going to do a Predict the Score contest with the Yankees and Indians tonight. So if you want to get involved in that, you want to win a signed Mike and Mike bobblehead, you can go to her Twitter feed.
I keep laughing how you say Mike and I have taken – your wives force you to take yourself.
It's really not true.
But it is true.
Well, if you want the true story, you want to just make a joke about it. The true story is
true.
Chris started giving them away because people were tweeting and saying I would like them, and she just sort of gave in. She felt she's got like a soft spot.
Yes.
And so she was like, okay, oh, yeah, sure, you're nice. You've loved the show all these years. I'll send you a bobblehead and all that. Stace saw this and said, can we do this? And I said, no, we can't. Mostly because you know me. I don't want to be bothered with anything. And then when Chris started giving that many away, Stace starts yelling at me like, well, no, we're going to start giving away bobbleheads. So, okay, well, now we're giving away bobbleheads. So now we're in the giving away bobbleheads business.
Thank you. You proved my point. So the wives forced their way into giving away the bobbleheads.
Well, one way or another, if you want to predict the score, who do you think is going to win tonight? Yankees, Indians for all the marbles.
Indians.
The Yankees, you think the Indians with Kluber?
Kluber. I think Game 2 was an anomaly, not the norm.
Well, if you go to Stacey's Twitter feed at StaceyGSG, you can predict the score, and you could win. I think she's giving away 3 bobbleheads today. Meanwhile, also on Twitter, I'm just looking at some of the reaction on the soccer. Again, if you're just waking up and you hadn't heard, I'm really trying to get a gauge for how significant this is to the average American sports fan.
Right.
Based upon last night's loss to Trinidad and Tobago and a variety of other seemingly improbable circumstances, the American men will not take part in the World Cup this coming summer. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. It's a huge story that because we're right in the middle of the football season and the baseball playoffs and everything else is not going to get all that much mainstream attention today, I don't think. So I'm trying to get a sense of that. But we're not in the World Cup. First time since 1986. So SR tweets at us, this is an embarrassing loss for U.S. soccer. Fire the coach, get players who want to be there. Reg Jones tweets, I believe that we will win was awesome to hear and participate in the summer of 14. It will be missed next year. And I agree with that. I think right now, because we're in the middle of the football season and then the baseball playoffs, people aren't paying a whole lot of attention. But when the World Cup starts and people wake up and say, oh, wait a minute, that's right, we're not in this, I think that people will pay attention to that then.
No doubt, and there's a lot of blame to go around. People want to blame Jurgen Klinsmann. They want to blame Bruce Arena. They want to blame the players. I think in the end, when you look at the skill level of some of our players, I mean, Tim Howard's ancient now. I mean, where's the youth? Where's the young goalie that's coming out? I think the skill level has to continue to get better. We have to improve that. And the players have to take ownership, Greeny. When the NBA sent their players to the Olympics, the Dream Team, there was ownership there. We took ownership saying we are the best basketball country in the world. We're going to show it to you. I think the same has to be done for the U.S. men's national team. They have to take ownership and feel a real sense of pride in the sport.
Keep those tweets coming through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. If your football obsession has strained a relationship, you need 1-800-Flowers.com. When you order a dozen red or assorted roses for only $29.99, you get another dozen plus a vase absolutely free. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. So from football to football, John Gruden and Kirk Herbstreit ready to go back-to-back here. And we always start, John, with a song that we think he'll like. Look at Bickler. Look how nervous he is. Travis picked a song for John this week. Let's see how he likes it. All right, John Gruden, this is Metallica. What do we think?
I think Travis lives in a dark room with dripping faucet. I don't like that song, Travis.
Wow.
That's rough.
That's rough. All right, we're going to have to quickly, before the end of this interview, Bickler, we're going to need something he likes. Get me some Van Halen stat. Anyway, good morning, John Gruden. How are you today?
Doing great. Good morning, guys.
Yeah, Booger McFarland's in with me today. And let's go over the game that you guys had on Monday night because it was interesting on so many different levels. Let's start with the debut of the Bears quarterback. What was your impression of Mitchell Trubisky?
I was really impressed, Mike. I thought he did a good job against a very good defense, a sophisticated, experienced defense in primetime TV, especially early in the game. If it weren't for a few penalties, the Chicago Bears, I think, win that game. And some of those penalties I didn't like. I thought they were ticky-tack. Touchdown called back because a receiver held. He had a beautiful throw in the opening drive down to the 12-yard line on third down. It was called back. He scrambled. He made some plays in the pocket, outside the pocket, and he just gives the Bears hope. And I think that's a big start right there.
John, what would you do going forward with Mitchell Trubisky? Obviously, he had a pretty good start. Now, how do you push the envelope forward? Do you continue adding to the playbook, or do you continue repping some of the things that he's doing and just have him do them a little bit better?
Well, I think we have to face reality in Chicago, number one. They don't have any receivers that are notable. You know, they're missing Kevin White. They're missing Meredith. They're out for the season. They're not coming back. They moved on from Eddie Royal and Alshon Jeffrey. They have a bunch of no-name wide receivers that really have struggled to make any kind of an impact at all. They just don't have very many weapons outside Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen, who's a rookie. So I think you're going to see more bootlegs. You're going to see more of an emphasis on play-action passing. But if they don't pick up some wide receivers that can make a difference, I don't care who plays quarterback. They're going to struggle to move the ball and put points on the board. It's tough.
One of the things that I think is most interesting about this, and it is certainly not unique to the Bears and Trubisky, is that in that game alone, he took more snaps from center than he did his entire collegiate career. So with that thought in mind, how do you devise an offense for that? Are you force-feeding him what we would consider to be a traditional pro-style offense? Do you think we see more and more of what guys like Andy Reid and others are doing where they are mixing in a lot of college concepts? Where do you think that is going, not just in Chicago, but across the NFL?
Well, I think it depends on your personnel. I think the best player on the Bears team right now is Jordan Howard, and you'd be a fool to get in a shotgun and run a bunch of zone reads. You want to get this man deep in the I formation and really enhance his running skills. He's a guy that can dominate a game. He is outstanding, but in the long run, you want to be diverse. You want to do a little bit of what Seattle does if you have an athletic quarterback. You want to try to merge some of the things that you see in college football, the zone reads, the perimeter offenses that really use the no-huddle offense. But I think you have to enhance who your best players are, and right now in Chicago it's the tailback. And off of that, they've got to create some play-action passes and some bootlegs until their receiving core comes on.
John, looking at the other team, Minnesota, Sam Bradford, the trainer says he has wear and tear on his knee. We don't know if that's going to get any better. You have Case Keenum. Teddy Bridgewater could be ready soon. What do you make of the quarterback situation in Minnesota?
I think that's one of the most difficult quarterback groups to figure out in all of football. I think Bradford's on the last year of his contract. I don't think they picked up the option on Teddy Bridgewater's contract. Whoever the medical people are going to have a huge say here in trying to determine who has long-term sustainability. Is Sam Bradford going to be healthy? Can he stay healthy? What does the doctors say? What do the medical reports say? How severe was Teddy Bridgewater's injury? Is he back to the Bridgewater of years past, or is his game going to be compromised? I think you have to get all these medical facts, and you have to really be prepared to make a difficult decision, because you're going to have to invest in one of the two, none of the two, and in the meantime, you're going with Case Keenum, who is a bulldog, a Jeff Garcia-type bulldog quarterback you can win with. He's proven that, especially with a good defense. But I have no idea where they're going with those two injured quarterbacks.
That's the long-term question, and I agree with you. But as far as the short-term, I heard some people suggesting yesterday that until and unless Bridgewater is ready to play this year, with Bradford being as injury-prone, and I'm going to use the word brittle, that might not be exactly the right word, but whatever it is, not dependable as he appears to be, that they should just make a decision. We're going to play Keenum. We're going to rally around him. So everyone who the quarterback is, we have some stability at the position. Does that make sense to you, that you just say, we know this guy is available, he can get the job done, at least we'll know who the quarterback and the team will know who the quarterback is every week, and just decide on that?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I don't like playing injured quarterbacks that can't take the reps on the practice field and you can't count on. But if you go back and watch the opening game, when he played against the New Orleans Saints, we were there. He looked as good as any quarterback in football. So you have to really be careful what you say. It's still early in the season, but I would give him a couple weeks to try to get that thing completely healthy and rally around Keenum, who really made a statement the other night in Chicago.
Mike, John Gruden's with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. So that was last week. Let's go to this week. The Colts and the Titans, a couple of injured quarterback situations there as well. We start at Indy. We won't see Andrew Luck this Monday. We're not sure when we will see him. We're seeing some pretty good things, I think, out of Jacoby Brissett from what I've been able to see. I'm sure you're watching the film. What are you seeing from Jacoby Brissett?
He's athletic. I did not know Jacoby Brissett was this athletic. I mean, he is winning games with his scrambling ability. He has a big arm. He can throw any pass from any body position on film. I have seen that. And they have a dismantled offensive line. I think they're on their third or fourth different center. The protection hasn't been great. But he has hung in there and really done an excellent job considering when he got to Indianapolis. I mean, he got here late in this process, and he has come alive and really given the Colts some hope with his athletic ability and his powerful arm. And T.Y. Hilton is still one of the best receivers that I've seen in the AFC.
So that's the game this coming week, the Colts and the Titans in Tennessee. And as we let John go, we just couldn't live with it, John. We need a song you like. Is this a little better?
Hey. You should start every show with David Lee Roth, if you ask me. Thanks for having me on. That fires me up. Have a great day, McFarland. Keep it going, guys.
Thank you, John. That's John Gruden with us. It's always good to leave him with a smile on his face. Like, John, he's not even in the room, and he intimidates me, so I'm glad to see him. Did you see the look on Bickler's face when John had that initial reaction? Good stuff there. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Comparing rates to help you save. Now that's Progressive. Call or click today and find out how much Progressive could save you. So some football there with John Gruden on the field in the NFL. We'll do some college football on the field with Kirk Herbstreit coming up in a few minutes. And Herbie, Booger, I'm looking forward to listening to you and Herbie talking, because obviously both of you are as well-versed in college football stuff as anybody is. But we also understand that the off-the-field football stuff is about the biggest topic in sports right now. And within the last half hour or so, the President of the United States has tweeted again about the NFL. I will read it to you. This was from 6:47 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, so basically a half hour ago. It is about time that Roger Goodell of the NFL is finally demanding that all players stand for our great national anthem, respect our country. That isn't, I don't know that that's a fully accurate way to describe what happened yesterday. Roger Goodell sent a memo. I'm sure by now most football fans are aware of it, to all the clubs, and they will have an owners meeting this week to discuss this at more length. But if I were to summarize the memo, it was basically Roger Goodell telling the owners that the league has come to the conclusion that they need to figure out a solution to this, because the protests, whatever their intention are, have created a reaction that is harming the league. Yeah. And that, I think, was what what Goodell was saying to the owners. What exactly is coming, whether the owners will unilaterally implement a rule that states that all players must stand for the anthem or not, we don't know. We've obviously seen what Jerry Jones has said. We know the Dolphins have made such a rule. Now, Booger, you played in the league a long time, and I know you to be a very thoughtful man. And you were talking about this with me a little bit in the makeup room before we came in, so I'd love you to share some of your thoughts.
Well, Greeny, first of all, I think it's gotten to a point where it's a lose-lose situation, because the initial message that Colin Kaepernick was putting out there about kneeling, which is police brutality and social injustice, is now gone by the wayside. And now it's become both sides grandstanding. It's about the flag and the anthem and the players, and now the economic model of the NFL is starting to be affected. And so when I say it's lose-lose, the players' message is no longer being heard, and the NFL, the economic model, is starting to be affected by sponsors and things of that nature. So here's what I say, Greeny. If I were in a locker room right now, I would tell everybody, let's stand. I would call a player on each team, and I would say, let's stand. Regardless of how you feel, now's the time to stand, because what you're kneeling for is no longer being heard. Then I would go to Roger Goodell, and I would say, Roger, you want everyone to stand because it's now affecting our game. It's affecting our bottom line. Let's be honest about this. Where the money is where people are going to listen. So when the sponsors are calling saying, hey, this is a bad look, we have to listen. We understand that we're all in this game to make money. So now, let's everybody stand. Now, Roger, that everybody, all 1,700 players are standing. Can you help us? Can you now be the voice of us? Because we listen to you. More importantly, you and everyone else and your owners, your bosses, listen to the president. The president he's made this his agenda. So now that we're standing, we need our voice to be heard. Because the original message was about, can we do something about the police brutality and the social injustice? So I would ask every player in the NFL today, if you can hear me, stand up. Stand up. And then once everybody stands, tell the commissioner, now we're standing, can you go stand for us? Because the initial message is gone, Greeny. So now it's a lose-lose situation. Everybody's losing. The NFL is losing sponsorships. People at our company are being affected because of grandstanding on either side. So it's lose-lose now. So if you're an NFL player, it's really simple. Stand up. Let's take the politics out of our game. Take the politics away from the NFL. Let the fans get back to football. And then once that happens, now somebody stand up for us. Take our message, take it to the commissioner, and the commissioner, you talk to your buddies, talk to the 32 owners, and take our message to the president of the United States. Because if he wants to grandstand, if he wants to call us out on Twitter every morning at 3 a.m., 6:30 a.m., you're listening. Are you going to listen then? That would be my message. Are you going to listen then when we do what you ask? You want us to stand? Great, we'll stand. Now, can you listen? If we stand, can you listen? I think that's where we need to go right now, Greeny, because it's obvious that the kneeling and the anthem has overtaken everything else. And so I would just ask, if you're a player and you can hear my voice, just stand up. Stand up. Let's unite in a different way. Let's unite behind each other and get back to the common cause. And the cause is really simple. We don't want police brutality. We don't want social injustice. Kneeling no longer gets our cause heard. Let's stand and see if we can get our calls heard. So, Greeny, that would be my message.
I understand what you're saying. I have a variety of questions, and these are really complicated issues. Yeah. So it isn't as simple as, oh, you're right. So, right? Or oh, you're
Correct.
Dead wrong.
Correct.
It is a complicated issue on a variety of levels. The first I would have would be, in which order, if I was a player and I was moved to be doing what many of the players are doing, in which order would I do those things? would I say to the commissioner and or to the owner of my team and or to the president of the United States, would I say, I will stand and then I demand that you listen to my cause? Or would I say, if you listen to my cause, I will stand? Now, that might sound like a subtle difference, but I don't think it's a subtle difference.
Right.
It's a significant difference.
It is.
It is also making the issues that we're talking about here into negotiating chips, bargaining chips, which I understand not the idea of not liking. I don't like the idea of negotiating or bargaining over whether we're going to stand for the national anthem, and I don't like the idea of negotiating or bargaining over whether we're going to stand against police brutality and social injustice. Those don't feel like things that should be negotiated the way we negotiate benefits and other things like that. But that does feel, and also at the same time, in some ways, that where we are now.
It's the next step, though, Greeny.
What we have here is the President of the United States has made this an issue.
Yes.
It's one that he feels he's winning on, and he's not going to let it go. And as a consequence of that, so many people find themselves in a position that they cannot control.
Yes.
And so I understand where your sentiment is coming from. And it makes some sense to me. I would need to sit and think a little longer about whether there is another answer to this, but it certainly feels like a legitimate dialogue is the only place to begin. And I don't know that legitimate dialogue is taking place. It feels to me like if I were a player, I would want to say, if I was a player on that team, I would want to say to Jerry Jones, or if I was a player on his team, I'd want to say to Stephen Ross, or any of the other owners who might have this, the New York Jets, I think, with Woody Johnson and others. I understand what you want me to do.
Right.
Are you listening to what I want you to do?
Exactly.
And if that becomes a two-way street, then I could understand approaching this the way you're talking about.
And Greeny, I don't look at it as a bargaining chip. Here's the way I look at it. As the players started taking a knee to be heard, now that message has been overtaken by so many other things.
Right.
Okay, so now as a player, how do we redirect the conversation? How do we redirect the message? And it's not bargaining. It's more, okay, we're taking the next step. And the next step, for me, in my opinion, is that the players all stand. So now let's take that step, put the onus back on, one, our commissioner, and two, our commissioner can put it back on the President of the United States. It's amazing. We don't want to talk about politics and sports. But here's what I'll say to everyone out there. When the President of the United States tweets sports companies, sports personalities, he's bringing us in. And you have to respond in order to get the dialogue rolling. So the NFL players are going to have to do something, and Roger Goodell has to be a part of it because he's the commissioner of the National Football League, and he also works for 32 owners who, a lot of them support Trump. So he's got to toe a delicate line there. I truly understand that. But guess what? When they pay you $30 or $40 million, they pay you that to toe those lines. They pay you that to straddle those fences. And I think he's got to do that. More importantly, he should do that for the betterment of this league, because if he's concerned about the bottom line, he said one time, my goal is to make this a $25 billion league. We're halfway there. Halfway there. Since he's been the commissioner, we're more than halfway there. And I think if we can handle this small crisis, and I think he handles it the right way, he'll be indebted not only to the players will appreciate it, but he'll also move the dialogue back to where it needs to go, which is on the racial police brutality and the social injustice.
Hey everyone, Mike Golick here. Support for Mike and Mike podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Mikes. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Computer, execute 12.4p operation.
Optimizing algorithm. Running encryption packet alpha. Night. Oh, I don't feel so good.
What is it, computer?
Is it hot in here? It feels hot in here. I feel a little clammy. I should lie down or something.
A computer with a virus? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Those oysters Rockefeller were a mistake.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Booger McFarland is here for Golic today. We've got a lot of reaction, as you'd imagine, to the conversation we just had about the president and the kneeling and everything else. We'll get back to that, but let's stay on the field here. Every Wednesday at this time, our pleasure to welcome in Kirk Herbstreit as College Game Day is getting set to go to Harrisonburg, Virginia, for Villanova James Madison this weekend. Good morning, Herbie.
Good morning. How you doing?
We're doing great. Let's go all around a little bit here, and let's start with the game that you guys had Saturday night in the monsoon in Ann Arbor, and the somewhat stunning result as Michigan State. Which it felt to me, I watched the second half of that game, it felt to me like they intercepted every other pass that was thrown, and they wound up handing Jim Harbaugh a really tough loss in his own building that night. It's brought up a lot of questions about where Michigan is and where Harbaugh is in that program and everything else. What was your biggest takeaway from that game?
Michigan State's back as a competitive team. I don't know if they're back getting to the playoff, but they're 3-9 last year. That's coming off the three best years in school history, and they had off the field issues and just everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about it, to be candid. And I think it was a reminder that Mark D'Antonio can coach, and they seem to have right now a little bit of an edge on the mindset of that rivalry. Michigan players continue to kind of say, especially their alumni, Ohio State, Notre Dame, those are our rivalries. Michigan State, that's not really a big rivalry for us. And meanwhile, Michigan State's down the road going, just keep taking that. No problem. That's 8 of 10. Not a rivalry. So I really walked out of there thinking, not so much what's wrong with Jim Harbaugh. Man, he can't beat Michigan State. He can't beat Ohio State, because I think this program is obviously in great hands, and they're only going to get better. I looked at it and thought, this is somewhat of a rebuilding year for Michigan. Not that they rebuild, but they lost 43 seniors. I mean, they lost 10 starters on defense. You're gonna have a few setbacks when you lose that much experience. So I was more impressed by Michigan State than I was really down on Michigan. Now, John O'Korn replacing Wilton Speight, that's a real issue. He might turn out to be great, but we've seen him play now against Purdue, where he looks really, really good, and then we saw him against a good defense in Michigan State, and he had his struggles. So I'm anxious to see where he is this weekend against Indiana.
Herbie, I completely agree with you, and people questioning Jim Harbaugh as a college coach, to me, are insane. Herbie, what I would ask you is this. Let's take Alabama and Clemson and set them aside. In your opinion, who's the next best team out there in the country? I think that's where the real debate is.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a week-to-week thing for me. I mean, for now, it's a Penn State-Georgia debate as we sit here about week 6. I would maybe give Georgia just a little bit of an edge based on what they've had to do with their schedule. Going on the road against Notre Dame, probably kind of the game that they would put a little asterisk next to. But I just thought, you still have a young quarterback, and he's going to get into some situations that are going to be challenging for him to really see where he can be. So as I sit here right now, I'd give Georgia a little bit of an edge because of the way the defense is playing, and Fromm has been a great compliment to what they're doing with the running game. But it's, at some point, you're going to get into a game, Booger, you know what it's like. Quarterback's going to have to make plays when the world is watching and everyone knows, okay, this is where it's 3rd and 7. Can he do it? Because right now he's throwing a lot of off-the-play action. They're establishing the run. They're dictating when he's throwing. They're going to get into a game against Auburn. They're going to get into a game maybe against Florida where he's into those obvious passing situations. That's my one concern for Georgia down the road. But as we sit here right now, I'd give them just a slight edge over Penn State, with Penn State being that 4th team.
Yeah, we'll definitely agree with you on that one. Penn State still has their tougher games coming up. Herbie, we often talk about who's the next best team after Clemson and Alabama. No one mentions Washington, and in my opinion, it has to do with how they looked on a big stage against Alabama last year down in Atlanta. How do you look at Washington, and are you kind of torn based on how they looked against Alabama last year?
Man, that is a great point and a great discussion if we're going to be honest with ourselves. There's a reason that the committee and people who watch this sport give the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States the benefit of the doubt, it's staying power. It probably shouldn't be that way, if we're being really honest, but it is. We know there's proof in the pudding. Like, we know who these teams are because they've been there and done that. And with what Washington did last year, and the game wasn't a blowout, but they didn't necessarily, as kind of the new guy on the block, they didn't help themselves as far as showing, kind of building credence of who they are as a brand. Now, it doesn't impact me. We talk about this all the time. When Oregon was kind of building that brand up, because we had so many Oregon games, I was a big Pac-12 Oregon guy. I would try to really say, no, Oregon, they could play with these teams. And they opened up the season with LSU and Tyrann Mathieu, and the game got away from them in the second half, and people in the SEC kind of laughed at Oregon. I think Oregon on a given year, and Stanford and USC and now Washington, maybe Washington State, I think they can play with the best teams in the country. But I do think, to answer your question, what they did last year does hurt them as far as perception, because I think the people outside of that region don't necessarily give the Pac-12 maybe the credit that it deserves. And I think a lot of times they end up losing in that debate. With all that being said, I have no problem at all looking at the way Chris Peterson is building that particular program with the defensive line, the linebackers, the quarterback play, and giving them now, for me, I can definitely give them now the benefit of the doubt moving forward. If they beat the teams that they still have left on their schedule, I think Washington's in a position to be able to capitalize and definitely secure a bid in the playoff if they were to win out.
Mike and Herbie with us, brought to you by by Allstate. Sometimes we see these upsets in college football, and they're somewhat easy to explain. You mentioned Michigan State and Michigan. Well, Michigan State is better than we thought they were. Sloppy track that night, rivalry game. Then you look at what happened to Oklahoma an afternoon against an Iowa State team that was like in total disarray on a variety of different levels, and they go into their building and beat them. I'm always curious about that. How do you explain that? How does something like that happen to a team that all of us believe is as good as Oklahoma is?
Mindset, collectively, not respecting your opponent. It sounds like elementary or middle school approach, but you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids. Look at the Oklahoma team. Look at the energy and attitude of when they played in Columbus. I mean, they wanted to beat the world. They could have played, I don't know, it was like in their mind they could have played the Packers. They were so fired up and on edge. They wanted revenge on their mind. They had a purpose. They were tired of hearing about Ohio State, tired of hearing about what they did in Norman the year before. This was their chance. Their leader, Baker Mayfield, man, he was like, not today. We owe these guys. We're going to get these guys. And they played out of their minds, right? Well, all of a sudden, we all start saying, well, okay, Oklahoma is going to represent the Big 12. Everybody's telling Oklahoma how great they are. They're in the playoff after 2 weeks. And what happens, and this is what Nick Saban talks about, is rat poison.
I was going to say it's rat poison, Herbie. This is the rat poison.
I'm telling you, man, Nick Saban works 52 weeks out of the year, not 12 during the season. 52 weeks. He has mental coaches that come in and talk to their players, because what they're doing in Tuscaloosa and how they avoid complacency and how they keep their edge is unprecedented. We just don't see it. And for the most part, they don't have weeks where they show up flat. That's hard to do for 12 straight weeks with 18 to 22-year-old kids. And so what I think happens to Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley, great coach, first year, has a team with Baker Mayfield. They almost just show up against Baylor. Baker's on the sideline after he scores touchdowns, yelling up to the fans. You got to be a professional. You have to be focused on the purpose. You can't. I remember Pete Carroll telling me, I used to talk to him about his SC teams when they were rolling year after year after year. And I was like, man, it's crazy how you guys can go This is when they were really good. They could go anywhere in the country, whether it's a team that they're favored by 30 against or a team that they're favored by 2 against, and they were the same brand, same team every single week. And his point was, we don't look at our opponent. We work so hard against each other and compete so hard against each other that Saturday, that's recess. Like, that's a given. We're going to go out and do what we do. So he created a mindset that don't look at who we're playing. Oh, it's UCLA this week. We really got to get fired up. He looked at it and challenged his team to just get ready week in and week out, regardless of who the opponent is. And that's what Nick Saban does. And I think Lincoln Riley, he learned probably a valuable lesson as a first-year head coach, that you can't ride the emotion of, it's Bedlam, now we go. It's Ohio State, now we go, here we go. You can't do that. You kind of go against perfection. You go every week and you don't get caught up in the media and Twitter, all the shenanigans and all the outside noise. If you allow your team to get caught up in that, you're going to show up, take your foot off the gas, and you're going to get beat by Iowa State by a backup quarterback. I mean, that's embarrassing for Oklahoma, and we'll see how they respond to it. But that's what happens to me in college football, and it's going to happen to somebody this week. You look at the slate of games, it's really not great. But you know what? Someone's going to lose Saturday because they're not going to respect their opponent. And I promise you, we're going to talk next week on Wednesday, and you're going to say, holy cow, Herbie, how did this team lose? It's going to be the exact same thing. It's an epidemic. It's a challenge for these coaches, and somebody will be a victim this weekend.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike Booger is here. Let's change subjects. We're a week away from the start of the NBA regular season. Earlier than usual start as they expand the season a little bit to try and work their way through some changes in the scheduling, which hopefully will result in fewer players resting and all the rest of that. And one of the teams that will have a brand new look and a lot of expectations, the Boston Celtics and their head coach Brad Stevens, is back with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Coach, it's Mike and Booger McFarland in with me today. How you been?
I'm great, guys. How are you?
Good, Coach.
I'm well, and we are well, and we are looking forward to seeing what your team looks like, because obviously it'll be an entirely different look. After what was a really good year last year where you finished with the 1 seed, you made wholesale changes, and the biggest of them, of course, is bringing in Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward in free agency. So let's just start from its most basic. When you have as many new faces as you have, what are the first and biggest challenges as you get a season started?
Well, I think you always look to try to figure out the strengths of your team, what they've done in the past, if they've played, at this level and performed at this level before, how to try to mix those strengths together. And, I think that you do start the season with certain objectives of, for us, it's been trying to play with a high motor on both ends of the court, being able to learn each other, to read and react off of each other, both offensively and defensively. And it's been a good start. It's hard to believe we're only 2 weeks in, and tonight's our last exhibition game, and then we open up in 6 days. But here we go.
Brad, as a guy myself that was traded from one team to another, I know what it's like to come in. There's an acclimation period. I'm curious, how has the acclimation period been for Kyrie, adjusting to his new team? Now you bring in Gordon Hayward. How have you handled that and made him more comfortable?
I think that those are probably questions that those guys can answer better. But we've only got 4 guys back from last season. So it's really an acclimation period, not only for, Kyrie and Gordon, but for most of our team, and then even for our returners, because, they haven't played with a lot of these guys. In the first few games here, we've started 2 guys that are returning and brought 2 guys off the bench that are returning. And I think, there is going to be some learning and growing together, but the general attitude, the work, the desire to do things together, the desire to compete and practice, it's been a really enjoyable couple of weeks. I mean, I think that these guys recognize that we've got to get better, and at the same time are enjoying that process together. And I think there's some things that we tried to do by going away for the first few days of training camp, which we have not done the past couple of years, and scheduling every meal together and those type of things. But then, at the end of the day, when you're competing together. It's more about learning and growing on that practice court and through game experience. And so I think there's some things that you can try to expedite in building a team, and then there's some things that just have to happen organically. And we're just trying to do what we do as well as we can every day so that we can expedite it as much as we can.
Game tonight, Celtics and Hornets, 7 Eastern on ESPN. Preseason action followed by the Rockets and the Grizzlies. Brad Stevens, head coach of the Celtics, is with us. And I opened it up by saying you guys start your regular season earlier than in years past. And that's one of the many things, and I commend him for it, the commissioner is trying to do to try and cut into the idea of resting regular season games and all the rest of that. How do you expect the schedule this year to impact scheduling, if you will, or the playing from different teams around the league? How will it impact, if at all, the way you approach the season, and how do you expect it to impact other teams?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see. If you talk to a number of players, obviously the extra days provides, or 8 days or whatever it is, provides. I don't think there are many, if any, 4 games in 5 nights. It lessens the number of back-to-backs. Now, if you talk to a few players, they actually say that they prefer the back-to-back because they know the next day is off for sure. And so I think that it'll be interesting to see how it all works over the course of time. But clearly, I love the intent and the thought behind, prioritizing and maximizing the rest factor and the health of our players within our schedule. And, I think that those discussions, this is probably the start of those discussions. I know that Commissioner Silver has been interviewed in a lot of different areas about length of season and game, et cetera. And, I think those are all relevant topics, and, we'll see what plays out over the next few years.
Coach, I've heard the experts talk about how the move with Kyrie and how all the moves make you a better team. I'd love to hear your explanation. How does having Kyrie at the point guard position instead of Isaiah Thomas and some of the other moves, how does that make you a better team in your mind?
Well, first of all, the only answer is time will tell, right? I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And I really like the group that we have. And I've said this before, when you make the moves that we made this summer, when you're in the coaching position or a playing position, and everybody else around too, there's an emotional cost when you make those moves because of the impact that those players not only had on the team, but more so on you, and more so on the people in the locker room. And so I think that, and those guys that are no longer here, Isaiah obviously included, I think that those guys had a tremendous run, and those guys did things that, made it fun to be around them every single day, and they know that I could not appreciate them more. And as we move forward with this team, I think the biggest thing is that this team has to become the best that it can be, doing what it does well. And so every season is its own entity. Every game is its own entity. You go into the game, and if you don't approach it right, or if you don't play to your strengths, or if you don't do what you do best, you're going to have a great chance of getting beat. And for us, we just have to focus on who we have again, how we can play to the best of our ability and accentuate each other's strengths, and we'll see what happens. But, time will tell if we're better or not.
It's Brad Stevens, head coach of the Celtics, again, opening next week in Cleveland. That should be interesting. Kyrie Irving going back to Cleveland in your very first game. Have you already had a conversation with him about what that's going to be like? We've seen star players going back to their previous cities and the reaction that they frequently tend to get. Have you already talked with him about what the expectations are for that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us, Mike, is that, first of all, when you look at it, when in my position, you're looking at it and say, okay, we opened the season with Cleveland. Oh, by the way, the next night we play Milwaukee at home. Really good team, right? So we're looking at it from the standpoint of how do we prepare ourselves to play well through 82 games. And so obviously Cleveland being the first game, there will be a lot of buzz, a lot of attention, et cetera, et cetera. But, everything we're working on is trying to be able to focus on our task at hand in the moment. And the great part about playing in a game like that is it will bring you right back to high level basketball right out of the gate, because you're going to have to perform without concerning yourself with the distractions if you even want to have a chance to win the game. And so ultimately that's a great thing for our team in its young stages to have to go through early. And regardless of result, I'm looking forward to seeing how we progress from there.
And we're looking forward to watching it. Coach, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Good luck as your season gets started.
Thanks, Coach.
Bye, guys.
Time for Straight Talk with us on Mike and Mike. It's brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. People reacting like crazy to Steven Strasburg. The explanation, again, given for why he's not starting today on regular rest, being that he's feeling under the weather. The reporting, Dusty Baker talking about mold and air conditioning, and the reporting in the USA Today that he ran a half a mile and was wheezing.
Who looks worse, him or Dusty?
Oh, Strasburg looks way worse. Everyone understands that Dusty is trying to defend his player.
Right, but he's lying. He's blatantly lying to us.
Listen,
in some form.
I understand people lying to me, okay?
Right.
I get that. And I listen, honesty is the best policy. I tell that to my kids, right, and that is a good way to live your life. But the God's honest truth is it's not a good way to live a public life, right? Sometimes you got to tell a little white lie. Don't get up there and tell me that you can't pitch because it's moldy and there's air conditioning issues, right, and all of that. Make something up. Pretend you fell in the shower. I mean, say something that makes some semblance of sense, because otherwise he's just going to get eviscerated, which is being eviscerated right now. The Chicago Marathon was run over the weekend. 9 octogenarians finished it. 9 people over the age of 80 ran 26 miles in that mold over the weekend. This guy was wheezing on a half-mile run. I mean, it is unbelievable. Here, Jack Yu, he's 83 years old. He ran the marathon in 4 hours, 31 minutes, and 59 seconds. He won the octogenarian group.
He could have beat me. I knew that.
He could have beat a whole lot of people. So, I mean, this is just a startling circumstance, and I don't know what to say about it. And according to the Washington Post, the Nationals asked Strasburg if he could pitch on Wednesday. He said, quote, "I'll give you what I got," according to GM Mike Rizzo.
I'll give you what I got.
I'll give you what I got. Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. I mean, this is something that, unless some further explanation of it, some more understandable or acceptable explanation of it comes out, this is the kind of thing that's tough to live down.
Well, it's going to be tough for him to overcome. And we thought the Nationals were a little dysfunctional. If you go back when Bryce Harper got choked out by Jonathan Papelbon, we were kind of wondering what was going on with that situation. Now this gives you another little sneak peek into that locker room. And I got to tell you, Greeny, when your best players aren't your most unselfish, these are the kind of things that come out of team environment.
But I don't understand the selfish piece of this. That's where this is confusing me. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
If this was about a contract, if this was about money. But this is not his elbow is bothering him, which could jeopardize the remainder of his career or anything like that. And it's not about the contract because he got the contract. You know, and look, maybe the other side of this is if he really doesn't feel like he can give the team a quality start, then maybe on some levels it's unselfish.
But don't you at least have to try, though?
That's my point.
I mean, you should at least have to try.
In sports, what we have been conditioned to expect is guys saying, you're going to have to rip this ball out of my hand.
Right.
We're conditioned to remember Michael Jordan in the flu game in Salt Lake City being carried back to the bench by Scottie Pippen and having one of the great and maybe one of the most legendary games of his career. And the general manager, Rizzo, said, we think it's smarter to give him the extra day to get better and hopefully have him at full strength if we get to a Game 5. But this is an elimination game. Yeah. There is no Game 5 if you don't win Game 4.
And the reason I say it's selfish, Greeny, is because it's his health. Okay, so he's concerned about his own health.
But not in a big picture. He's not. Is this going to make him so much worse? What's he going to get, a worse cold? Is he going to get pneumonia?
That's what makes it look worse. The fact that it is a cold. It is the sniffles. He's concerned about his health. Evidently, otherwise, why would he have a reason not to step out there on the mound? He's got his money. He's not concerned about his arm. He's concerned about the sniffles.
Max Scherzer, this is also in the Washington Post. Max Scherzer marched into Dusty's office Tuesday morning and announced he'd be available for an inning in Game 4 if needed. He probably wouldn't be able to give the Nationals much after throwing 98 pitches on Monday, but a person familiar with the situation said the Nationals will be willing to take Scherzer up on his offer. Boy, does that look even worse. So,
listen, I can't pitch. I'm wheezing. The guy that just threw 100 pitches says, you know what? I can give you another inning. How bad does that look?
Oh, and again, he's got what is his contract? How many millions of dollars is Scherzer's? I mean, he's the highest paid pitcher in baseball, right? If he's not, he's close. He got the huge contract, but so is Strasburg's. I mean, this is just. It's just a terrible situation. There's something about the whole thing that makes me feel bad. I feel bad for the degree of piling on that we're doing here, but I honestly don't know what else to say.
Yeah, they've brought you to a new low. You're basically encouraging our national audience to lie. You've made fun of Steven Strasburg. You don't know what a nebulizer is. Like, they brought you to a new low this morning.
It is true. I don't know what a nebulizer is. All right, we are Mike and Mike. We got the two baseball games today. You'll hear them both on ESPN Radio. You will hear the Nationals and the Cubs as Washington tries to keep its season alive and get the ball to Strasburg if he's able to pitch tomorrow, depending on the wheezing. And then you got the Yankees and the Indians tonight. And we've got, if you want, the bobblehead contest is going. Stace has a predict the score contest with Indians Yankees for tonight. So if you want to try and get in on that, you could win the Mike and Mike signed bobbleheads on Twitter at StacyGSG.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike were presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests appear on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and we are delighted that you are with us today. I'm delighted to have Booger McFarland in with me all morning long, and we are together delighted to have Will Cain in here to help us discuss the many and varied topics on the sports schedule. How are you, fellas?
Doing well.
Good.
I have a bone to pick with you, McFarland.
What's that?
Or as McFarley, as John Gruden called you this morning, which was a great moment in Mike and Mike history. And that is, I'm told you're the reason that I'm freezing to death. I'm told we have multiple temperature settings in the Mike and Mike studio. One of them is much too hot, and all the others of them are much too cold. There is nothing temperate on the temperature settings. In fact, it's so cold in here, it's remarkable that I'm working. Steven Strasburg could never do a show in this room at the temperature that it is right now with the wheezing. But when I complained about it, I was told that if it's any warmer than this, Booger starts to sweat.
Well, here's the deal. First of all, if you want to heat up, just get a take from Will. He'll get a hot take going. And
I understand.
He can heat you up.
He's made many people
That's
sweat.
Right, I do, man.
Number two, the equipment, along with me, when we get excited, we get warm. So we have to have it cool when I get excited and when the equipment gets going.
Speaking of excited, can I ask you a question, Booger?
Sure, let's go.
You know, I hear the promos around here. I've been watching the show. I do when I wake up in the morning. I've seen that promo about you calling him out on nervous chatter, on fake it chatter, on excited chatter.
Yeah, false chatter.
Yeah, false chatter.
Yeah.
Acting confident, acting excited when you're actually not.
Yeah.
My man is amped today, and he's got that cup of Starbucks over there. I can't tell what it is, but he is talking 100 miles an hour, and he's got topic after topic fired up and ready to go.
Well, this is called, doing my job. But what I'm drinking here, to be honest with you, is tea, and I usually only have the one cup of coffee first thing in the morning, and I try and limit myself to that. But I'm so cold that I needed something. As God is my witness, that's why I asked for this. I said, can someone get me something hot to drink because I'm freezing?
Okay, now you're starting to sound like Steven Strasburg, Greeny. Do your job.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, please, just do your job.
Let's get down to this. Will Cain is here. We are all in the Scott's Lounge together, by the way. Grow quicker, thicker, greener grass with Scott's Turf Builder grass seed. If it can grow in the most winter-like of conditions, then it would be able to grow over here in the Scott's Lounge right now because it's like 8 degrees in here. But anyway, we have a couple of different topics that I'm fired up on today, as you point out. And one of them is this thing with Steven Strasburg. And I'm trying to find a million different ways to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I can't do it. I'm reading Thomas Boswell's column in the Washington Post today and other things. What do you make of this? If indeed on its face it is what it appears to be, and there is no other obvious explanation here, what do you make of a circumstance where in an elimination game, a star pitcher who has given up 0 runs in 7 of his last 8 starts is not able to take the ball because he ran a half a mile and was wheezing and is feeling under the weather, and the manager says it might have something to do with the mold or the air conditioning?
What I take away from it is, at the surface level, taking everything at face value, the same things you guys have said. I mean, this is not only indicting Steven Strasburg's desire to pitch in this game, but perhaps who he is, to Booger's point, about rising to the occasion, wanting to be a part of the moment, wanting the game on his shoulders. But, now I have been accused on many occasions of being a contrarian, just for being the sake of a contrarian, looking for the other side even when it's not there. I think it's a worthy exercise at times, and this looks so obvious, and we are indicting him so deeply, we might consider there's something more here. And honestly, Greeny, I don't know what it is. I mean, have you ever been laid out by allergies? I mean,
I have, yes.
Yeah.
And I
laid out's the key part of that.
I have. I suffer very badly from seasonal allergies. And, I mean, many people who know the show over the years will attest to the many times I've been sneezing and sniffling and all kinds of things on the air. It tends to hit me once really hard in the spring when everything starts blooming and everything. And I've learned over the years the combination of medication that I need to take that gets it under control, and you do what you have to do. I mean, and again, I understand that if there's really bad issues with the mold and the pollen and the air conditioning, whatever it is, but as I just pointed out, they ran the marathon in Chicago this past weekend, and 9 people over the age of 80 finished it.
Yeah, but everybody reacts different. Look, in the end, I'm with you. I mean, I can't imagine anything short of a broken bone that would keep him from going out there and performing his job, or at least attempting to, and then, as you point out, Booger, having the manager call him back in when it's obvious that he can't. I agree with you, but there's a little part of me that's going, man, would Steven Strasburg really, at this point in his career, shrink from the moment? Would he really do that?
But what else is there, though?
Well, I'm trying.
Can you come up with anything else?
That's the point, Booger. I'm trying. Maybe he's laid out by mold. Maybe mold has really taken its toll on him, and it's taken its toll on him in a way it didn't to the 80-year-old marathon runner.
You can't even say that with a straight face. Like, you can't even come up and say, you know what?
But maybe it's something else. I think you suggested maybe it's something else. Maybe
Right.
it's something personal. I don't know, man.
Whatever it is, and listen, I don't ever want to be sitting here and advocating lying, right? I mean, that's not a good thing to do when you're a person when you're a person with a microphone and a loud voice.
We're starting now.
But there are some circumstances where the truth is not always the best policy, right? I mean, if they were trying to defend Strasburg, let's put it this way.
Well, so you're saying Dusty Baker may not be telling the truth?
Well, I don't know. I think he is telling the truth, because who would make this up?
Okay, well, what if he's not? What if he's not telling?
If he's not, then what is the reality? What could be worse than this? What are they hiding that would be worse for him reputationally and otherwise than we got mold, we got air conditioning? I mean, the whole thing feels so ridiculous. I hardly even know what to say. Sports lore is more than anything drawn around the great ones who've risen in the worst moments. Again, the Michael Jordan flu game comes immediately to mind. The Kurt Schilling bloody sock game comes immediately to mind. Sandy Koufax pitching with his arm basically hanging at his side comes to mind, and so many others. Jack Youngblood playing the entire Super Bowl with a broken leg, and millions of other stories. Basically every football player ever dragging himself out there, with lidocaine and everything else that you guys need to play every Sunday. That's what sports is supposed to be. Even I know that, and I'm the untoughest person in the entire world.
Well, and to your point, Will, about Dusty Baker, based on the questionable decision of taking out Scherzer after he had pitched 6 in the third inning, only giving up 1 hit, based on the underachieving nature that is the Washington Nationals, I don't think Dusty Baker is in a position, or would he put himself in a position, in my opinion, to get up there and lie. I think Dusty was giving us the honest-to-God truth. I don't think Dusty was in a position that says, you know what, I've earned enough credit in this town where I can take this one, and Steven Strasburg, you deal with it.
Do you think Strasburg will end up pitching in this game?
Yes, which will make, in my opinion, Strasburg look even worse.
Exactly. It will make it look worse. I think you're right. I think he'll pitch in the game.
I don't know. I don't. I think they'll save him for Game 5.
Well, what if there is no Game 5?
Well, that's why he's not. He should have the ball to begin the game. Right. I understand that. But if he's not well enough to pitch in the game, then he's not well enough to pitch in the game. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to me, especially if you are then planning to hand him the ball in a Game 5. You could make literally any other decision might sound more sensible. All right, let's move on to the next topic here with Will Cain. We opened the show this morning with the startling story coming from the world of soccer. And again, we understand that in the general sports discourse, especially in October, where we have the baseball playoffs and we have football, both college and pro, as hot and heavy as they can be, and the hockey season has begun and the basketball season is around the corner, that people aren't thinking a whole lot about soccer right now. But when the World Cup rolls around this coming summer, generally the one time this whole country kind of gets into soccer, the American team will not be playing for the first time since 1986. Will Cain, what is your reaction? And at the risk of asking it in an overly simplistic way, on a scale of 1 to 10, how big a deal is this to you?
My reaction is it's embarrassing, and it's about a 9 or 10 for me. I like soccer. I'm a soccer fan. I wake up on Saturday and Sunday mornings and watch Manchester City when they're playing because I'm a fan, beat whoever it is they're playing right now because they're awesome. I like watching the American team. I like watching international soccer, the World Cup. I like watching the Euros, CONCACAF. I like soccer. And it's embarrassing that the United States of America, a nation of 350 million people with unlimited resources, can't compete at the highest levels in soccer. Now, I'm not Taylor Twellman. I don't have the insight and deep background in soccer that a lot of these guys have to analyze what's the problem. Why is this? Because this isn't a problem of one game, and Taylor's pointed that out. It's not a problem of the United States versus Trinidad and Tobago. And so the truth of the matter is, it's not even a matter of missing this World Cup. It's missing the last 2 Olympics as well. And why is it? Why is it a country with that kind of population, with those kind of resources, cannot compete at the highest levels? Now, quickly, I'll tell you this, Green. This is the only thing I think I would have to add to this as a deep analysis. My kids play soccer, and they play in New York City, and they actually play through their school, and which is an odd thing to happen at the elementary school level age. And the philosophy of this unique program in New York City is this, that everywhere else in the world, soccer is the sport of poverty. Soccer is the sport of the streets. People play it even though they can't afford to play it. And in the United States, the feeder system for soccer is kids that are wealthy enough to have their parents pay for big travel teams that can get the best coaching and play against the highest competition. And that we are following a model, and I think, again, Taylor Twellman has pointed out, especially at the ages of 15 to 18, that has just neglected to develop the best players and the best athletes in our country. Soccer, among many other things in this entire recipe, needs to add the ingredient of being available to everyone. And I'm proud that in New York City, this program we're part of is part of that, of bringing it to African Americans, Latinos, every race, creed, color, and most importantly, every socioeconomic background.
Well, here's the thing I'll say, Will. I think you live in a country now in the U.S. where soccer at best may be the 4th or 5th most popular sport. They're trying to grow it, and the best athletes go elsewhere. So I don't know if it's a fact of choice. Maybe the kids are making the choice to go on and play football or basketball or baseball instead of soccer. I think the parents are the one that are really pushing soccer for the kids because of the safety elm that they think is there.
The only reason I think that fails, Booger, is this. There's 350 million people here. Right. Even we are awesome at swimming. We're awesome at golf. We're awesome at 4th, 5th, 6th selection sports. You know, it's not just that football and basketball get our best athletes. We're good at almost everything except for tennis that I can think of. We're good at almost everything, and soccer shouldn't be an exception to that.
Yeah, and tennis, we're really, I would describe it as in a lull outside of the Williams
Specifically
sisters.
on the men's side.
Yeah, because, I mean, we have historically been great.
There, right.
We have produced more great tennis players than all the other countries in the world combined. We just haven't done a lot of it lately.
Right.
But to your point is well taken. Because I was thinking what Booger said. Also, if you took the best athletes in the United States, just take the NBA. And if all those guys had grown up dreaming of being soccer players instead of being basketball players, would we be the best soccer team in the world?
Yes.
I mean, we would.
Yes.
That kind of is the answer to the question.
Well, no, but that doesn't mean that has to be that's not our problem. That would be, what you said is certainly true. If the best athletes in the United States were competing at soccer, we would be among the best in the world. But that doesn't mean that's what our problem is, because again, sports that can be 3rd, 4th, 5th on the kids' selection list, we're still great at. Why aren't we great at soccer? And in my estimation, It's a development problem.
Well, the question you're asking, or the statement you're making is, these other countries take their best athletes and put them in soccer, maybe some in baseball, whereas the United States are taking their 2nd, 3rd, maybe even 4th tier athletes and putting them in soccer. I think that's a very viable option as to why we've fallen behind and we're trying to make a huge push.
But again, 350 million people. How many people does Belgium have? Does Belgium have more people than New York City? I don't even know if it does. Does it have a population over 8 million?
I'd be stunned.
And Belgium is a world powerhouse in soccer. So it's not because their best athletes are going to soccer and ours are not. We have more people to pick from. We have a deeper problem than just what sports kids are selecting to play.
Look, we lost to Trinidad and Tobago yesterday.
Right.
More people grew up in my building than that, but that's neither here nor there. All right, Mike and Mike, Will Cain is here. We're presented by Progressive Insurance, our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Okay, Booger this morning, I don't know if you got a chance to hear it, had, I thought, a really interesting and impassioned perspective on what has become the overwhelming sports story of this time, and that is the issue of NFL players kneeling and the reaction from many, including the President of the United States. I know this is something that you've been on basically every show on the planet talking about, Will. But, Booger, because I don't want to ask you to shorten it because, you know, there's so much nuance in it, but for those in the audience who didn't get to hear it, what is the basic point you were trying to make?
Well, I think right now we're in a lose-lose situation, and I think the NFL commissioner and the NFL owners have figured out that this is affecting the bottom line. The players are starting to see that this could potentially affect them and their ability to work with Jerry Jones and some of the other owners saying you can't play for us. And so I think it's a lose-lose situation. And more importantly, that the overwhelming message that was put out there by Colin Kaepernick and others about some of the racial inequality, some of the social injustice, the police brutality has by and large been ignored and is being ignored right now. So my whole plea is really simple. Let's all stand now. I think the players, the message is being lost. I think things are being affected that we didn't expect or want to be affected. So now let's stand up. All the players stand up. Now, turn to the commissioner of the National Football League, Roger Goodell, and says, you want us to stand. You're sending out memos. You're sending out pleas for help. We'll help by standing. And in return, or maybe not in return, but we would like you to help us. Because there's a dialogue that needs to be had between the president of the United States, who's calling out the NFL, who's calling out their players, who's calling out people that work at this network about this very thing. And so we're going to ask the commissioner, we'll stand. All 1,700 players, we stand. Now you help us get a dialogue to get back to the initial issue of police brutality and social injustice. So that's my plea to the players, because kneeling is not working any longer. Kneeling is now creating issues that were not intended. So I would like them to stand to push the onus on Roger Goodell, to push the onus back on the president of the United States to get some dialogue so we can eventually solve the issue at the beginning of this controversy, which is what Colin Kaepernick wanted in the first place.
Booger, I'm almost with you 100% of the way there. I am so personally exhausted by this entire topic. And it's not because I don't want to have this conversation.
Correct.
And it's not because I don't want to find solutions with you, for example, Booger, who I've had many conversations with. And it's not because I think at the end of this rainbow we're going to agree on everything.
Right.
But it's such a mess right now, man. It is such a gaggle of BS, of people yelling at each other, accusing each other of the worst of human motivations and intentions, and I don't know how we see our way out of it. I mean, I agree with you. We are now landing in a place where it's lose-lose every which way around, and I would like to help find a win-win. I do think kneeling has to stop. I think that you're right. I think it's gotten in the way of any kind of productive conversation or any kind of productive solution. I really do. And I'm one of the people, as I've made clear, that sees kneeling as an insult to the concept of the United States of America. I won't stop there. I won't stop at that insult and neglect to go forward and hear the conversation we need to have. But I think many people can't get beyond that emotional reaction to something they feel very deeply about, the American flag, the national anthem. And players need to realize that. For a great percentage of the fan base, that's how that's landing. And there won't be any conversation after that. I think if we can do our best to look at this from these four angles, President of the United States, please stay out of this. You're exacerbating problems, not solving them. Owners, number two, Jerry Jones and Roger Goodell. You probably have to do what you're doing. You have to put down some kind of rule, or you have to say this is not going to happen, because their simple and solitary goal is business, and it's hurting business. Fans have made clear, at least a great percentage of them, they don't want to see this anymore, and that's what owners are responding to. And finally, players. Players have a greater goal in mind than kneeling for the national anthem. Yes. And is there a way we can get that conversation on some kind of productive path? You know, we've had conversations about police brutality, the killing of unarmed black men.
Yes.
There are going to be aspects of that, data perhaps, that we're going to disagree on. But we're not going to disagree that there's inequalities in the United States of America, that there are injustices, both on isolated incidences and on greater scales. And I think we can. If you and I, or you and I, Greeny, for that matter, are any small symbol, there are things we can agree on and things we can move forward on. But we can't just keep circling back to this national anthem and flag over and over. We need to move beyond it. I think the way is to stand.
You know, Greeny, it's to a point, Greeny, now that everyone is grandstanding on their particular points. The president has found a case in point where now he can say, look at the NFL, I got you. We're talking about the tax breaks. We're talking about all these different things, and it's all about the flag. Never once have I heard him mention about the police brutality or the social injustices. Now you have the owners. The owners are really in a tough situation. Roger Goodell is in the toughest because he's employed by the owners, but he has to govern the players. You have to always look out for your players, because the reason there's so much tension now between D. Smith and Roger and the players in the league office is because a lot of the players don't think the owners give a damn about them. So you have to pay attention to your players. But the owners are saying, wait a minute, we got to look at our bottom line. Because when the sponsorships start getting affected, now our business gets affected, and now our pocket and the bottom line gets affected. So it's a very tough situation. That's why, in my opinion, Roger Goodell has to be the one that says, listen, these are our players. Okay, if we can ask them to step on this field with all the dangers of CTE, all the dangers of concussions, and everything that goes on in the dangerous sport of football, at least we can do is listen to what they're saying. Because they're putting their lives and their family's livelihood on the line every time they go out there. And it would be irresponsible of us not to do that. Roger has to convey that message to his bosses. And to me, I think if the players will stand, I know Roger well enough, I think Roger will do that. But I think the players are diluting the message right now by kneeling, because as long as you kneel, now the president can continue to grandstand. He can continue to send out tweets at 3:45 in the morning. He can continue being what he's been. And now the NFL owners and Roger, they have to respond to all of that instead of getting to the issue of how can we help the communities where black people feel like they've been violated over and over again. Once we get there, I think then we start to solve the issue. But right now, everyone's just grandstanding on their particular platform.
We'll give you the final word.
I would just say this. We spend a lot of time, and I have as well, going after Roger Goodell, talking about all of Roger Goodell's failures and the way he has not lived up to the responsibility of his job. This letter, Booger, acknowledges pretty much everything you said. It says, that the national anthem is threatening to erode the unifying force of our sport, that like many of our fans, we believe you should stand for the national anthem. But he does say here, we need to work with our players to find a platform. Now, you can say that's political speak. You can say that's PR talk. But that's exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
Find a way to help these issues work towards solutions. Now, the NFL doesn't have an obligation to do that. No workplace does. But in being part of a community with your players, it's probably a wise thing to do. Mm-hmm.